everyone, I'm Manchara Priya and welcome to another episode of the BridgeIt Podcast. So BridgeIt is a community where together we try to bridge the gap between the availability of mental health resources and the knowledge about them. The aim is to reduce the taboo and increase accessibility. And in this episode, we have a very special guest. We have Sachi from MannMukti UCLA. Thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yes, so I think before we begin, I can just very briefly introduce MannMukti, and then of course you're here to tell us more about it. So MannMukti is a group of passionate individuals looking to advocate for the South Asian community, change the dialogue around mental health, and to provide culturally relevant support and resources. So they're doing such a great job, and I'm so happy to have them here today. But yeah, so I think we can just start with talking about MannMukti, like what your role is in it and how you got into it.
Yeah, of course. So I'm communications director. It's a board position in MannMukti, and essentially how I got into it is that when I transferred to UCLA from another 4-year, I was just kind of looking to get more connected with my South Asian identity, find more people or find a community that I could kind of talk to and just, have a good time with. And I'm also a psychology major, so I would, take any chance to talk about mental health, especially in our community. And so when I was at EAF, I found them tabling, and then I signed right up and then got involved, and it was such a fun club, and everyone in there is so welcoming and open and so nice, and it's just really easy to get connected. And essentially how our meetings work is that every week or every other week on Tuesdays, we have a certain meeting topic. So if it's like addiction or relationships in South Asian communities or, things like that, whatever our members would like to talk about, we have that conversation, we kind of introduce it, and it's kind of an open discussion about how we feel about it, like what are some nuances that kind of come up, or how are certain, like one person's experience is different from the other. And sometimes we also have community organizations come in and talk about what they do and how we can help, and it's just an overall really fun club.
Yeah, that's really great. I know you said that you got into it through EAF.
Yes.
So now, related to more people who might want to get involved in MannMukti, how would you say, like, of course EAF is one way, how would you say are there other ways for students to be involved, and is there like an ideal candidate you might be looking for?
Honestly, our club is very non-competitive. We wanted that to be a highlight because, it's UCLA, like so many clubs are so hard to get into, there's application processes, and we also have an application, but it's not competitive. It's just to kind of see what kind of person you are, what you would want to do in our club, and kind of get a gauge of what you'd like to get out of it. And so, EAF obviously, but you can also just walk into any of our general meetings. They're every even Thursdays.
Okay. So
even Tuesdays of the quarter, it's from 6 to 7:15, and usually it's at the Rise Center. And then it's also our Instagram, so follow that, and you're just welcome to come on in whenever. And it's just like, it's a very open club, so if you want to be there for one meeting, definitely come in. If you don't like it, that's totally okay. It's not your cup of tea, but I'm sure you'll stick around.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at your Instagram and I was like, oh, you hosted a Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara night, and I was like,
I know.
I want to watch it so bad.
Exactly. Wait, we're doing more events like that, so definitely.
I will be on the lookout for sure. And I know we started talking about community and how you found your South Asian community within MannMukti. So I think we can first continue with that topic as well. So I know a lot of people do talk about the challenges within South Asian community, and we're going to touch on that too in this episode. But I think South Asian culture is a lot associated with strong family values, ambition, discipline, and perseverance.
Right.
And in what ways do you think the broader US culture can learn from South Asians in these aspects?
Yeah, I think definitely we have a lot of values in our culture. Perseverance, I think, strong family values, like just community building and bonding. And I think those are definitely sometimes things that I don't see a lot in, my friends that are from, American families and things like that. And a lot of the times they're actually really shocked about how, focused or centered my life is on my family and, how close we all are and how they're like factored into a lot of my decisions. So I think those are definitely really positive values about our community, but I also think that every community has its strengths and challenges. So sometimes we value like dedication or ambition, or sometimes near perfectionism, to the point where sometimes it gets like tied into our self-worth, and we're just at the point of burnout and things. So I think that for every culture is just like a balance of everything, and kind of adopting things that maybe sometimes the US culture is better at, like emotional openness, or taking some downtime for yourself. So I think there's things that we can both give and learn from the community.
Definitely. Have there been, like, just out of the structure, have there been any instances where one of your friends from American families, as you said, were like shocked at seeing things the way you do, or how you approach things?
I think it's just like a really small one, but like all my roommates, they're American, or like they're not of the South Asian community, and I call my parents very often, at least like twice a day, and sometimes they're like, wait, like you just called them earlier today, like you're calling them again. And then sometimes they'll be like, like I haven't talked to my parents in like a week, or like a month, and that's really hard for me to believe, because one, I think like when I entered college, it started off that my parents couldn't go like that long, but now I think I'm in the stage where I'm like, okay, no, you have to talk to me, like. But I think that's like one of the ways that I think is just kind of what I've seen.
No, definitely. That's me too. I like call my mom and like, hello.
Exactly.
What are you doing? I'm bored.
I know.
But I think I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
But now coming back to the community in MannMukti, I was like, you also said that you found your community, and I was looking at a lot of people from the board. They also found their community within MannMukti. So in general, what role do you think the community plays in just well-being and mental health? And you talked about what role MannMukti played, but if you want to elaborate on that more as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think all throughout this episode, I'm going to be saying the words community so often, but we really do think that it's like a really central part of, emotional well-being, and also why MannMukti is there. We want to be a safe space, a community where, students like us who are South Asians who, really want to advocate for mental health, or you just like find like a place where you can share with your experiences and like things that maybe you weren't able to do in like at home, or like in your other clubs, or with your friends sometimes. And I think that's what MannMukti is, really like a community for students like that. And just the structure of our meetings, and kind of how it's not really like mandatory, it's just something for you to do. And we've heard a lot from our members too, that like they weren't planning on staying, but then they like came to a general meeting, and then we're just like, it's just really an open conversation. It's essentially just like an hour 15 yap session about what you want to talk about. And sometimes there are deeper topics that we like domestic violence, or like things like that in your families. And I think it's just really nice to have a community that you can kind of go into and be like, hey, like I felt like this, and then someone else is like, oh my god, wait, I've had that experience too. And just kind of having that shared connection, like, oh my god, we felt the same thing, we're all of the same culture, and we've had the same experiences. It's just really healing in a way, just to find that like little bit of connection.
Yeah, no, that does make sense, because I feel community-wise a lot of experiences differ a lot. What I may go through as a international student from the South Asian community might be very different from another international student, or just a student from here. So I think finding that group of people who can just a bit understand what you're going through really does help. And about the uncertainty that's going on right now, a lot is happening in the United States right now, and the South Asian community, among others, have a lot of anxiety related to the current situation, with unsurety of what to do and what not to do.
Right.
So just what advice or what resources would you recommend to get over this fear, and to just understand that, okay, we will get through it. It's going in some direction, but we're going to reach the end there's light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing.
I think I would definitely say that staying informed is a very crucial and key detail. You know, sometimes people are like, you know, I don't look at the news anymore, like I'm protecting my mental health, or like, you know, we get exposed to so many bad news like on a day-to-day basis, and it's like a lot of the times it's like about your community, or like, you know, and it's just really hard to sometimes go through that. But I think that protecting your mental health can be done while also staying engaged with the media and the news, and staying on top of what your community is going through, you know, what kind of changes could be affecting you and things like that. And I think trying to compartmentalize those news with like your emotional, because obviously you're gonna, you know, feel a lot of emotional changes when you're looking at, you know, bad news. But I think trying to somehow separate that and kind of keep your head on straight and just be like, okay, like this is happening, how are we going to deal with it? And again, going back, it's your community, your loved ones, you know, your family members who are going through the same things, or your friends who are going through the same things. I think those are also really valuable support systems that can get you through this, so that you're working together, you know, to stay safe, to stay in your communities that you love, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. I just very much hope that everyone knows, just research about the resources, be informed, as Sanchi said, and just believe in yourself, believe in families, hold your loved ones and your community close by, and it will be better.
Yes.
But now, while community has a lot of positive aspects as well, I think if we talk specifically about South Asian families, there's a lot of, and specifically South Asian families in the like South Asian students in the US, I believe from what I've heard from students, there's this idea of too South Asian to be American, but too American to be South Asian.
Yes.
And I think even in TV shows and movies, they're represented in a certain way. So do you think that this representation somehow feeds into any identity struggles or imposter syndrome that South Asian students might have?
Definitely. I've said that phrase like so many times to my friends, like I'm definitely too like brown to be here, or I'm too white to be here, like things like that. And I think it also just has a lot to do, especially if you're like an immigrant, you know, because I like moved here and I wanted to fit into school. Like I wanted to be part of my friend group and, you know, assimilate and things like that. And I think that doing that is like following like American customs, like, you know, how you grow up in an American way, or like you bring a certain food to lunch, or like, you know, you listen to certain music and you like talk in a certain way. I think that like doing all of that seems really central for us to belong. But also when you come back home, your family or your parents don't really have that same perceptions. And, you know, you have family values, you know, traditions, responsibilities at home, and, you know, your own cultural traditions that you want to uphold. So then you have to like kind of, I think it's called code switching, where you like go back and forth between the communities and kind of change your personality in one way to, you know, fit the other one. So it doesn't feel like you're like fully whole at one time. And I definitely think that the media has a hand in this, because historically, I think South Asians haven't been represented the best way. You know?
Yeah.
It's always been like the nerdy kid, or like the one friend no one wants to talk to, or the comedic relief and things like that. And I think that really like influences our perceptions of how we see ourselves, you know, even though like we know that it's not like every day, or like that's not really how it works, but it really influences, and like we internalize those perceptions of ourselves. And I do think like more recently we're seeing like better nuanced, more like complex South Asian characters, but I think it'll take a lot to rectify, you know, what previous media has already done.
Definitely. And I think in media as well, if I compare the shows made here in the Hollywood media, I'd say, as compared to Bollywood films and Bollywood TV, it's also very different of how both of them are definitely representing the South Asian community in some way, but both of them use such different like people with different appearances to represent the community. So I think that vast difference also kind of leaves a gap between, okay, but they're the ones being represented here, but back home they're represented as other people. So what do I believe in? But I think it's not I think South Asians are not like, it's not black and white, it's like a spectrum.
Exactly.
And even those who are immigrants, or those who are born and brought up in a particular country, or who have just always been here, it's kind of a new identity for them. And I think instead of trying to like fit in per se, it's the combination of both of these factors that makes them unique. It's just like how I like to see it, because there's so much I learned from the people who were brought up here. For instance, like they're from India but they're brought up here, and I was recently talking to one of my friends who is from Canada actually, but like but just talking to her made me realize that yes, we do have our similarities, but at the same time she has learned a lot of new things that maybe I wasn't aware of.
Right. Yes.
And I got to know only after coming here. So I think it's
it's a valuable shared experience, I think.
And also now coming more to like expanding the identity topic more to the LGBTQ plus identity. I know that is very questionable and very hard to navigate within the traditional South Asian households. And what challenges would you think that the South Asian LGBTQ plus students commonly face? And what advice would you give to someone who's like struggling to balance their cultural identity with their sexuality or their gender identity?
Yeah, I think that obviously we just talked about that, you know, especially if you're South Asian and you're living here and like you feel like you're too South Asian to be in a white space and too white to be in a South Asian space, you're already dealing with like an identity somehow like crisis in a way, and then adding like, you know, being queer is like another challenge on top of that. But I think that it's very important to kind of see that your sexuality or like you being queer is not separate from your culture or your identity. Like it's just making you who you are as like a full whole person, and it's not really like separate entities. And it's definitely hard, especially when maybe your family members are not, you know, really agreeing with, you know, who you are or like who you've found yourself to be. And it can be really challenging when like the people you love the most aren't really accepting of who you're becoming. And again, I hate to say it, but coming back to community, I think the world is so big. The world is so big, and I promise I think there's like a community for everyone. And it just takes a little bit of initiative on your part to kind of be like, okay, where are my people? Like, where can I find them? Is it like the GSA? Is it like this South Asian group? Or is this like somehow like a middle ground? Like it just takes a little bit like to find it. But I think even like support like a friend or a mentor who maybe has the same experiences, or like being part of the community like you know, and it just takes like one like reach out to kind of find your people. And I think just like talking about it even with one person can take you a long way and make it a little bit more easier in like the journey.
I feel just finding even the one person you can share similarity at least to some extent, it really does help and makes it a little less scary. And has there been a similar instance in MannMukti? Maybe I know you in your GMs, like you said, you just talk about shared experiences. So has there been any instance about either their gender identity or sexuality or any other issue where some member might have come and been like, oh, like this is what I'm facing, or I don't know how to deal with this dichotomy, what do I do? And then they've gotten support from other members?
Yes, definitely. You know, when we're having these open discussions, and maybe it's about like familial expectations or like maybe marriage expectations, and you know, you're like 25 and then suddenly your parents are like, hey, like, you know, what's going on? And then, you know, they're kind of talking about how they're going to maneuver that, like say if they're, you know, they don't like men. Like, how are you going to tell your parents that? And, you know, that's kind of a really hard thing, because obviously as South Asians we want to make our parents proud as much as we can, and sometimes, you know, when we're finding our identities and things that doesn't align with what they believe or what they think is right. So I think we've definitely had these instances where, you know, people have come in like, oh, but like I don't like men, so how do I go about telling my parents that? And someone's like, wait, I don't either, but I talked to my parents about this in this way, and it wasn't as terrible. And obviously those hard decisions are hard, like conversations are hard to start, but I think hearing that someone else did it and that they're of like in the same position as you are, and that maybe it didn't turn out as bad as you did, because I think we have a way of catastrophizing things more than, you know, that they're gonna be. So I think that also is like something that helps.
Yeah. I think even for our like South Asian families, it's a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
Because till now, they've not really been exposed to this kind of gender identity or this viewpoint. And now they're suddenly being told, like, oh, I don't like men,
Yeah.
for instance. So I think the initial reaction will definitely be of shock. But hopefully, to whoever is in this situation, whoever's questioning how to talk about it, maybe just try and give them some grace and some time, maybe try to explain it to them objectively rather than taking it to heart in the first instance, maybe. Because just, I'm not saying that it is the right thing to just like shun your children out because they're not following the norms, but maybe they might come around just because they weren't aware of such a thing earlier.
Right, because they're also, new to the place, so they're still like adjusting and things are new for them as well as they were new for you. So I think it's just giving them some grace, but also, staying true to who you are.
Definitely, like, it's just in hope. I think you should try to, but then at the end of the day, it is, you need to be who you are, you need to be true to yourself. Otherwise, I feel there'll be a part of you who won't truly feel yourself. It's just like you're just performative for other people.
Yeah. Yes.
But yes, now I know you briefly talked about in one of your GMs the topic was like domestic abuse within South Asian community or even drug abuse. So I was reading and I found that in like a lot of South Asian households, domestic violence is unfortunately prevalent, and sometimes it's also considered normal, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So how do you think a student from a household having these issues, either maybe substance abuse, particularly alcohol abuse, as in the case of the South Asian community, or domestic abuse, how should they go about getting help? And not only in the sense of just, the first step is obviously either, if necessary, leaving that unhealthy environment, but also getting over the trauma that it might have caused.
Yeah, definitely. I think on domestic violence, I think that's a very hard thing to go through and also a very unfortunately common thing. And, there's a lot of resources out there. I think that sometimes we as South Asians don't know about, or that we don't kind of go about using because we don't want to, take that step and be like, oh, like, what if my family finds out? What about this? But I think that, it is about taking that first step to ensure your safety or your family member's safety. And in one of our GMs, actually, we had Sahara come in and talk about, domestic violence in the household and maybe abuse and what kinds of abuse and what that can look like. And they're definitely a really great resource in reaching out to if, you're going through something like that, or if you know someone who's going something through like that. And there's very specific South Asian communities that are geared towards helping that. And there's also South Asian Network. We had our general meeting on substance abuse with them, on like how that can look like in the community, or how you can maybe talk to your parents about it, or what you can do to get yourself out of that situation. And they both offer services for therapy, mental health services. They have some great licensed therapists on board that can help you go through this. And sometimes it's like very low cost, because I know sometimes that your families, you might be financially dependent on them, but you don't know how to kind of get those resources, so they help you with that as well. So I think those are two resources that I would really, reach out to if you were going through something like that. But also, again, sharing within your community, because, it is a community and there are certain stereotypes or certain, actions that happen quite frequently that have become normalized. And I think even just talking about it with your friend or another trusted maybe mentor, or there's some great online spaces that you could also talk to, or share your experiences.
I think the first step can be especially scary in such situations.
Yeah.
But as Sachi said, a lot of resources are available, and I will probably link them down in the description as well. But definitely, if you're going through something like that, do check those out, because help is available. And I know it can be scary, but there is, as I said, light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
And this question is more related to the the traditional cycle of maybe substance abuse or domestic violence in South Asian community. Another, I think, kind of a norm is a lot of South Asian families do not fully believe in mental health disorders. They feel like it's made up, it's an excuse, like, oh, if you're so down, if you're on the verge of going into a depressive episode and you're in bed, you can't get out, they think you're just trying to be lazy and not do work. So how would you say we can kind of cope with this lack of knowledge or ignorance about the actual existence of mental health issues?
Great question. I think that one, that mental health is stigmatized a lot, but I also think that South Asian communities and, you know, maybe the older generations, they've been kind of taught more to, you know, go survive, you know, be on survival mode, especially if you're going to move here to like a new country, like, you know, you're new, you have to work your way up, you have to, you know, take care of your kids and make sure you're safe and go through everything. So I think that mental health isn't really a priority for them. They're kind of in survival mode. So kind of just like keeping that in the back of your head that like, okay, like this is, you know, some barriers to why it's so stigmatized. But I think also educating them slowly, because I think everything needs to be done in like small quantities and like you build up from there. But I think, you know, just one conversation at a time with your parents, like you really sit down and be like, hey, like, how are you doing? And like, because, you know, they also go through a lot of things themselves, and sometimes they don't even know how to deal with things, and sometimes you don't know how to deal with your things. So I think just sitting down and acknowledging that, you know, both of us are going through certain things, and how are you really doing? Like, hey, like, can we talk about this? Like, can we just take like a few minutes and really just, you know, be honest with each other and open, and like little things, like maybe like once a week you do this, and then you like keep building it up, and then to the point where they're like, okay, maybe, you know what, mental health might be a thing. Like it might really be a very valuable asset to kind of feeling better about your life, you know, dealing with things, family things, work things better, and not taking so much pressure on yourselves. And I think just like taking it one step at a time, but also kind of making it your responsibility, especially if you're really passionate about mental health and like you want to, you know, make some changes within our community, because it is so stigmatized that all of us who really care need to be doing, you know, some sort of initiative and like making that step or taking that conversation. And I think my first step was, I think, joining MannMukti, because I'd never really been part of like a South Asian community that really advocates for mental health. So I think taking that step, and then from then on, I've learned on how I can involve my friends and how I can involve my family members and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that worked for me, in a way, I realized that I'm a person, if I have a face-to-face conversation and talk about my feelings in person, I don't exactly know at that moment how to say it.
Right.
So I think realizing that about yourself first before going into a conversation with your family can also definitely help. So what I tend to do is I like type out a message, or I write it down in the letter form, and then be like, here, this is what I'm feeling. I even do it with my friends. So I think that obviously will be a starting step with your family as well, but maybe it can also act as increased self-awareness for yourself.
Yes, definitely. That's a great point.
Also in that point, I just want to, because we talked about a few sensitive topics in the last like few minutes or so, I think I really want to point out the fact that there are a lot of helpline numbers available in case any situation get heightened. And there's a free online resource available called Together All, which I also talked about in my last episode, but it's a great free resource for UCLA students. If you feel like you can't talk to your family about mental health issues, you can just go there, and they're trained psychologists, like trained people who are there to help you, and it is free. So if you ever feel in need for help, you can either go to the hotline numbers, call CAPS for an appointment, or just go to Together All as well. But yeah, I also briefly know that you're a psych major, so I'm assuming that you do research a bit, right? And I also read that MannMukti also has some involvements in research. But I was also reading that a lot of South Asians in the US are more vulnerable to issues like substance abuse, mood disorders, and suicidal thoughts. And do you think this is partly because many mental health frameworks are not specifically catering to the South Asian community, and we're just imposing a general framework onto the South Asian as well as other minority communities?
Yes, definitely. I actually do addiction research, so that kind of fits the question. But I think that, first getting to the point of seeking help is really important, and that also just, again, with like the stigma in our community. But I think when you get to that point, is also really challenging because, we have our cultural values and how we, maybe manifest certain stressors. So, we're not really good at talking about things out loud or, sharing emotional things with each other. So that might manifest in like headaches, fatigues, more like bodily symptoms and things like that. And I think that your therapist being, culturally competent or like having that knowledge that, he or she or they like belong to the South Asian community. This might be, somehow like they're showing their stressors this way, or that their family matters a lot to them. So maybe that's how like certain things like that, like being just like culturally more aware, I think is a new concern for a lot of therapists. And while they're getting a lot of cultural training, it's also just hard, which is why I think that South Asian representation really, really matters. Like having a therapist who is South Asian, like that would make you feel that would make me feel so inclined to like talk to her about my problems. So like, maybe you'll actually like understand and, be able to help me, versus like someone else from another like race that would be, maybe you don't really get what I'm saying. And it can be like really hard to get to that stage of asking for help and then finding a therapist who doesn't get you, and then you're frustrated because you're like, I did so much work to get to this point and like it's not really benefiting me. So I think that's why representation really matters. And also, just like mood disorders, substance use disorders, depression, that also just comes from the lack of coping mechanisms or, the space to talk about things. Because, when you don't have an outlet, like you're just gonna go rely on something like substances, like you're gonna go drink alcohol to, make you feel better, or, bottle it all up, and then until like your mind can't take it anymore, and
it just comes out in a very aggressive manner.
Exactly, and that just leads to more issues within the community. So I think it really is just like a reinforcing cycle of everything. But definitely representation really matters, and this is why we need more South Asian people to really, go into this field. And if you're really passionate about it, please do so. And I think that'll be really, really helpful in kind of getting things rolling.
Yeah. And I think how you talked about you're at that first step, but then there's your therapist does not understand you, maybe because they're not from the same cultural background, and you get frustrated. I think it definitely is there, because you will first initially spend that time trying to explain what you're going through, and that'll take so much of your emotional capital, where at a point where you actually seek help, you're just like exhausted. Why am I here? Like
why do I have to explain that, like why my family is so involved in my decisions? Like I don't want to have to explain that.
Definitely. So I think, as you said, representation really does matter, and it's just a structural reform that we need to make, and more people definitely do need to come forward from the South Asian community as well as other minority communities as well. And now also, one last thing about research. Do you think, as you said, there's definitely a research gap, and one thing is to involve more South Asians as therapists or mental health professionals to give support, but also do you think the more research heavy labs, or maybe some certain labs, especially at UCLA, do you think they need to change their processes in certain ways to make sure that South Asian community is involved, or they make a system that can be applied to our community as well?
Yes, definitely. I think there's a lot of points here to talk about, because definitely when researching, we're really looking at like diverse populations, and like being in the LA area, there's so many people of like so many different ethnicities and races and identities here that like in one big sample you get like a lot of different types. But I think a barrier in that is that when you like see a bulletin board like, hey, research study, like depression study, anxiety study, I don't think there's a lot of South Asian people that are gonna like go click on that or go like look at that QR code or like volunteer their experiences because they don't like, I don't know, like they don't want to share, like they don't want to be a part of that, like that's not really important to them. So I think that could also be a really big barrier because getting South Asian people to like, hey, come here, like volunteer your experiences, that's a really hard thing to ask them to do, especially when they're not used to doing it. So I think that can be a barrier, but also definitely having, you know, researchers that are maybe more specifically focused on just South Asians. I think that would also take more more South Asian researchers, but I think sorry, I'm losing we're yapping so much. But I think that would just, you know, take a more focused look at that, and it will be hard because, you know, again, the population isn't really ready to cooperate yet, but there's definitely a lot of South Asian people out there who want, you know, that voice, who want to seem represented. Because even when I look at like research studies and they're going over their demographics table, there's very rarely like a South Asian group. It's like Asian, but then that like encapsulates everything, and we're all so different. So like even finding your place in that little thing is so important, but so hard. So I definitely think like having more, you know, targeted research studies on South Asian communities, because I think there has been a growth in more research in like BIPOC or underrepresented communities, but I do think that South Asians are still getting majorly left out. So I think it's just like a combined effort on both sides of the spectrum that needs to get going.
I think I might also be a part of the problem in this regard, because I think I do remember like a few instances where I've gotten an email about, a research study, do you want to participate? And I've kind of not looked into it and kind of just ignored it, at least to some extent. And I think that's also because growing up, we have been taught not to prioritize mental health as much, and like, not that it's not important, it's just that our priorities have been different, more academic and work focused than the mental well-being and mental health aspect. So I think that might be a little bit of a cause, or like might be associated with why we have less representation. But definitely, now like hearing you talk, and I would love to advocate for more participants, because a lot of these are anonymous.
Exactly.
So if you're like, that is definitely my fear as well, fear of being judged, of giving my information out there to the world.
Exactly.
A lot of them are anonymous, so it's not like your identity is being revealed.
I was gonna like add that there's another, I think in like all South Asian maybe people that, like, at least my parents, they like drill me into being like very private, like don't share your information with anyone, you know, you never know who's listening, and you never know where it's gonna get you. So I think that's also maybe a part, but it is fully anonymous. Like, I think all research studies are really just anonymous. They just want to get a sense of your experiences, you know, how you're feeling and how that can be maybe correlated to your communities or things that happen within your communities to kind of better, you know, get intervention strategies that will help you better. So I think it's just kind of getting over that barrier and just like contributing your experiences so that the community can help you better.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll go in there. I think it'll improve. I hope it does.
Hopefully.
And I think one last thing I want to touch on, I know that MannMukti has something called Sathi, which is a peer mentorship program, I believe. So just if you want to talk more about it and explain what that is.
Yeah, so it's essentially just pairing up upperclassmen with lowerclassmen and just kind of giving them, you know, mentorship and maybe even like a built-in friendship. At the end of the day, when they're, you know, coming into UCLA, it's a huge school. It can be so daunting, you know, finding your community, your like niche community can be really hard. And I think just having like someone who has gone through it before, who has maybe had the same challenges you did, can really be helpful and just kind of like a guiding hand throughout your college experiences, and hopefully, you know, you make a good friend out of that. So it's like it's just a very calm like mentorship thing where you can just have someone who kind of has gone through the same things you have to lean on and just support you when you're growing up, and then hopefully you can become an upperclassman and then become a mentor.
Yeah, I think definitely coming in to an unknown environment, as you said, a helping hand can be really stressful and can help with a lot of fear and anxiety that that you might have about, oh, like this is, first of all, it's such a big school.
Exactly.
UCLA is so big.
So big.
Like I came from a school in which the total, like from K through 12, we only had like 2,000 students.
Oh my god.
And then I come here and it's like
massive.
people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I think definitely, like just knowing someone who has at least been there for a year or 2 years and knows some processes of how everything goes can for sure help. But yeah, I think with this we come to an end of our podcast, and before we end, I just have one closing question to ask you. If there is just one thing that you feel listeners should take away from this episode, or just one resource that they should know about, what do you think that should be?
Obviously, I'm going to plug my club, MannMukti, but I think that if you are in the South Asian community and, you know, you're feeling like you just want some people to talk to, and that I don't want you to sit back and be like, oh, but in my community, like, we don't do things like that. Like, yes, we do. And we're going to start. And if you are feeling that way, you should help and you should start. And, you know, you should find that initiative within yourself, and, you know, join MannMukti, join Sahara, join like another organization where like your passions and your culture can be like combined, and, you know, you can help your community, because there's a lot of people that really, really need it. You know, the research or the numbers show that, you know, we are very vulnerable to mood disorders and, you know, things that aren't healthy for us in the long term. And I think that just taking that one little step can really go so far. And just know that everyone has a community out there. It just takes a little bit of hunting to find it. But once you find it, it will be super fun, super helpful for you and the community and the people around you. And I think that one takeaway is just that you should go find that community. And who knows, it might be at MannMukti.
Yeah, like it can be through a lot of different ways. Like as you said, MannMukti is such a great organization. You can find a dance group that you like. You can find people in your class who are from the same background. So just, I think, yeah, that really does bring everything into a compact sense. It's just like trying to find your community. Yeah. So yes, with that, we come to the end of this episode. And if you want to contact me, you can obviously contact me at the BridgeIt Instagram or the Gmail ID. And I will also link MannMukti's contact information somewhere on the screen. But thank you so much for watching, and see you soon. Bye!